I want to shoot it over to Terry because I know the business part. Again, this is what this brother specializes in, and I can imagine that if we had 100 entrepreneurs on here right now, that they would all listen to you, William, and agree. Or even if they hadn't thought about some of what you're saying, they would be like, okay, yeah, I want to figure out how to do that.
Yes.
And Terry's heard me say this a million times on the show. We're great technicians, not always great business people in a sense. And some of that's a learning curve, and you're out there and you're ahead of the game on that. But the beauty is there's a Terry Simmons that exists that can help them with that part. That's what I think he was able to help Kimberly with or whatever. So it's almost like you don't have to do it on your own, even though it's like, okay, what you're saying sounds great, but what do I got to figure out to even be able to do that? Because I'm still tied up in grinding over here. So I get it or whatever, but I'm pretty sure a lot of this was music to your ears, Terry, just to hear somebody who thinks this way, because you're constantly talking about this till you're blue in the face. So go ahead. Any thoughts on what you're hearing, brother?
Yeah. Unfortunately, what William described sounds like par for the course. And, that dynamic plays out in our communities way too often, whether we're talking business or we're talking about, tangible assets like real estate. To be honest, and I don't know that anyone on this call has this issue, but I'll say it because it is being recorded. And I know, Montoya, you like to break things down and on the granular level and maybe share it in bite-sized chunks. I think the first thing, if we're talking about on the small business side, is that we really have to change our mentality about how we manage revenue. We steal from ourselves, is what I call it. We don't understand the concept of paying ourselves what would, in essence, be the fair market value for our operational role in our businesses. And what we do is we gouge the business, and we use those resources to subsidize a lifestyle, as opposed to reinvesting it in the business so that the business can do what William was describing, which is to build infrastructure, to be able to bring on talent, to be able to document processes, to have the right technology, to have the right brick and mortar, if that is in fact a necessity for the business, to have the right equipment, and then to be able to bring in talented people that can follow that blueprint and continue to improve upon it. And there's a renaissance going on right now in our communities, and so the good thing is that we are starting to see a lot of influencers online, young people like yourself, Montoya, and then those that have astronomically sized audiences, 2-3 million followers. And we don't need to name them. We all know who they are. A lot of them are Atlanta-based, to be honest. Atlanta is really a hub where a lot of this is taking place. So the good thing about it is that our community is starting to think about entrepreneurship and investing probably more than we have in the past 70, 80 years. The negative thing about it is that a lot of those influencers perpetuate the issues that William was describing. And so it becomes about, in essence, having this alter ego or this moniker that we go by. We tell people to quit their jobs, to monetize whatever their skill set is, charge what they're worth. And I even see some of, and again, this is pertinent as far as I'm concerned. I even see a lot of these cats that'll say, why would you work 40 hours for someone else when you can work 80 hours for yourself, in essence, and have the freedom that comes with that. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I already know you ain't got no employees, because you wouldn't be talking like that if you needed to attract talent. You wouldn't go online and say having a job makes you, in essence, subservient, or that you're a second-class citizen if you have to actually attract talent. Because it's kind of common sense. So I'm like, okay, yeah, you're a solopreneur, with a virtual assistant in Beijing, and you just pushing a bunch of digital product. And I'm not trying to say there's anything wrong with that, but that's not the model. These people, they're gifted, that they're gifted communicators, that they may be, aesthetically gifted, they may be funny online, they may be great storytellers, and they're able to attach a product to it that they can sell. Most small business owners have to build businesses in a different type of way. And so I just think that's the first thing, is that we got to shift our mentality. The second thing we got to do is realize that over the course of 20, 30, 40 years, what you sell or how you sell it may evolve a number of times because technology is always changing, the market's always shifting. You think about, companies that may have been offering transportation, 10 years ago, and then an Uber and a Lyft comes in and disrupts that market, and they got to rethink their whole business model. But a lot of times what happens to us is that a product or service becomes obsolete, or if there's a relegated need for it, we don't have the infrastructure to pivot. And I learned this really, really early on, is that the product or service may change, but whatever the footprint of is of that entity, whether that be revenue, whether that be credit, whether that be relationships, vendors, a history of performance, that's stuff that transcends industry or product or service. But we don't really build our businesses that way. We build it on, Jane Doe, right? So if Jane Doe's ability to, do something artistic or do something technical or do something service-based is no longer there, then the business no longer has a place. When if it was built, in essence, from the ground up or from the back to front, as I like to say, then you could just reskin it, right? Like change the interface, change the message, but still use the same infrastructure, you maybe even the same talent that you have, and pivot and go in a different direction. And we saw a lot of that, during the pandemic, and not that it's totally over, but we saw that happen. And so I think that it's just a shift in mentality first and foremost. We tend to think about entrepreneurship from a solopreneurship standpoint, which is what can I do? What can I monetize? If I'm making $20 an hour doing this in corporate America, then certainly I can, demand $100 an hour if I'm doing it for myself, in essence. And it just becomes a glorified job at that point, because that $100 an hour gets broken down. When you was at your job, you didn't have to worry about, business development, marketing. You didn't have to worry about the equipment, the inventory, any of that, the insurance, and so forth. So you're still making, matter of fact, you probably still should be making $20 an hour with your company if you provide the same service, if that's what the market value is for your skill set. But I don't think some of us don't understand it, but Montoya, to be honest, I think more of us understand it and aren't willing to deploy the sacrifices that's necessary to move that way. I can tell you, and I'll hush and let other folks weigh in, but I've been taking this approach to my businesses since probably 2004 is when it was a real shift for me. And so there were times when, my companies were generating, 7 figures in revenue, but I was driving a really modest vehicle. Most of my employees were driving nicer vehicles than I was. But I would put my money either into the business, or I would put it into community-based initiatives that I was passionate about. So like pre-pandemic, I would sponsor these basketball teams. Man, I would spend 40, 50 grand a summer making sure that these inner city kids could go and, lay up in 4 or 5-star hotels and do these different things. And so I got to a point where I realized that in my base market, which is Louisiana, and I got clients in Georgia and Texas and Pennsylvania, you name it. We do this all over the country, but Louisiana is my primary base. And there was always this ambiguity around, what does Terry do, or what does T. Simmons and company do? And Montoya, I put out a ton of content, so you almost got to be walking around deaf dumb to not understand what we do. But it wasn't that they didn't understand what we did. It was that the validity wasn't there, because I wouldn't go and get the iconic stuff that our community places the emphasis on, right? And so it's like, now don't get me wrong, I have nice things. I live a really good lifestyle. My kids are spoiled. But the thing, if I spend money on something, it has to have a functional use, right? So like, I got a Mercedes van, but it's because I need it for business travel. I need to be able to move my team around. I don't drive a Mercedes per se for my own personal use. And it was a lot of ambiguity around, what does he do? How does he do it? Is it really legitimate? Because the stuff that I place value on is not where our community place value. So, I would tell people this all the time. You want to go find where my money is, you might be go look in my, in my server closet versus looking on my driveway. Get it? But, so I think that's really, from a mindset standpoint, I think that's where the most work is to be done, is that we got to start thinking about infrastructure first. And then if we're thinking that way, then we have to say, okay, if I have this cafe that does 1.2 million a year, I can't pay myself $300,000 to run that cafe. I'm gonna pay myself $100,000 to run that cafe, and I'm gonna reinvest those dollars into starting the second, third, and the fourth cafe. or making sure that I got the right POS, fintech system, or whatever it is that they need. So I think that's what it is. But again, I don't know that anyone on this call has that issue, but maybe, this is something you can deploy to your broader audience and broken down. But that's the real issue, is that they pull up in my office and the husband pulls up, they in business together, husband pulling up, he in a 5 Series Benz, the wife in a Denali, and they're telling me that, they don't have a resource to reinvest in the company. And I'm like, you just drove up in it. It happens every day. So I think that's what most work is to be done. When we talk about the technical skill, I mean, I'm not a doctor, you know what I'm saying? But if I have an ailment, I know to go to someone that went to school 16 years for it. So I don't think the issue is that we have to know how to do it. We just have to, know to do it, and then secondly, be willing to do it, and then go find the subject matter experts to help us to build in that manner. But I don't think it's a scarcity of information or availability of people to do it. It will require us to have a generation of sacrifice, right? And it'd be that delayed gratification that we're not always willing to do, because it's catch-22. A lot of our people will say, well, I'm not going to be able to get the traction in my community and get the business if I don't project success. So then what we do is we fake it till we make it, or we put the cart before the horse. And I think that's the biggest issue in our community.